By the door.
Well, he still uses breach of formula.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, this is the natural stuff. Oh man died at 94. Still have the same.
Write this up,
Why did you?
You don't have
Okay, I'll make sure I make
Which is intended to Division 2.
He's here. Oh, Division 2.
Yeah, the Division
I think-
7.
Joe, Professor Douglas had you sent meeting today. Yeah, they're all the meetings coming from. He originally thought he couldn't make it. I sort of twisted his arm a little bit. The reason I did was originally this was supposed to be. Bernie would have, but he was. There's a need for them to talk I think maybe if there aren't other IEEE members there.
That's a reason. It's 3 and 5.
The committee really worked very hard through its efforts to have this site dedicated and picked and selected as a milestone for the IEEE. Many people worked very, very hard to do this, and I want to introduce them. And I see Steve Angelo, who's our history chairman, is sitting back here. Please stand, Steve. And Dr. John Coltman, he was walking around here. Oh, there he is. John, thank you very much. And I'll mention some of the others later on after we conclude some of the other portions of the ceremony. The next part of the ceremony would be remarks, and they will be by Dr. Ronald Klein, who is director of the Center of History for the IEEE and headquarters.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of the headquarters staff of IEEE and the History Center at the dedication of this milestone. Actually, this is the first ceremony to dedicate an IEEE electrical engineering milestone. It's the third milestone, but it's the first ceremony. The other two milestones are the landing of the transatlantic cable at St. John's, Newfoundland in 1866, the reception by Marconi of radio signals in 1901. Other milestones are planned, and due to some other circumstances, the Atom Smasher has the honor of having the first ceremony. The purpose of the milestone program is to bring a greater awareness to the public and to engineers of the heritage, the rich heritage of electrical engineering. The American Society of Mechanical Engineers, the American Society of Civil Engineers have a similar program in regard to National Historic Engineering Landmarks. These are very similar to the landmark programs that you're probably familiar with in regard to historic buildings. And if you'll notice, there's a bronze plaque on the Atom Smasher building that is designed specifically to resemble those types of national historic landmarks. And we also work with the Historic American Engineering Record in designating this site. In fact, I had a telephone call from that office in Washington, and they're very interested in the Atom Smasher in being on the national record of engineering sites. The qualifications for a site to be a electrical engineering milestone are that it be of national significance and that it be of lasting value. And I think the Atom Smasher definitely pertains to this. It was the first program in nuclear physics established in industry, and it led to the pioneer developments in nuclear power that was pioneered by Westinghouse. And I think those two definitely make the Atom Smasher a electrical engineering milestone. I want to commend the Pittsburgh section for the nomination. We are just inaugurating the electrical engineering milestone program, and the nomination that the Pittsburgh section did for the Atom Smasher was very good. John Coltman at the Westinghouse Research Lab has a tremendous file of old letters and correspondence dating from 35 to 38, which details the history of this Atom Smasher. You can literally follow the history and development of the erection of this Atom Smasher through those papers. So I want to commend very much Dennis Taylor, Stephen Angelo, and John Coltman for that development. One result of the program, in addition to honoring this development by Westinghouse, in addition to helping to preserve a local landmark and also a national landmark, is to provide a better understanding of electrical engineering history. The historical files that Westinghouse is busy helping to locate and other records give us a better understanding of industrial research, which has made probably some of the most significant advances that have changed our lives. So we are very pleased that through this effort, we were able to better understand the history of electrical engineering. So again, I want to commend Westinghouse for recognizing its heritage. I think this is a very appropriate time. Next year is the centennial of Westinghouse, and also next year is the 50th anniversary of the approval of funds for the Atom Smasher. So I believe this is a very appropriate time to recognize the Atom Smasher as an electrical engineering milestone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. The next presentation will be made by Professor Joe Douglas, who is on the faculty at Penn State University Capitol Campus, where he traveled from today after a rigorous journey from the far islands of Hawaii. Joe's very tired, and you know how it is over in Hawaii. That's why we brought the weather here with him, didn't you, Joe? Joe is a member of the IEEE Board of Directors and also a member of the Region 2, which is the administrative body that's governs the Pittsburgh section, just to give you an idea where that is. Joe's going to present the plaques on behalf of the IEEE and the Board of Directors. Joe?
Thanks. After my 2 weeks in Hawaii, I guess the first thing I should say is aloha. We heard that so many times over there. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers Incorporated, hereafter known as the IEEE, I'm pleased to be here today to be a part of this important gathering. For just a couple minutes, permit me to fill in your information concerning the IEEE. Number one, that group is a volunteer-driven organization, and its purpose is dedicated to the development and improvement of the electrical sciences in the areas of electrical communications, electrical generation, and electrical control. The IEEE and its predecessor organization just last year celebrated their centennial. And we were reminded of names such as Edison and Bell and Steinmetz and Tesla, whose names are familiar with this location very much so in many cases. But it is people like that who are making up our organization today. The organization has a membership worldwide of over 260,000. We are broken up into about 260 sections, one of which Denny Taylor heads here at Pittsburgh. And we're not boasting of being a large organization, but we are a worldwide organization dedicated to looking over the electrical sciences. The Institute recognizes primary activities and efforts that lead to significant contributions in the electrical sciences, and certainly the atom smasher fits that description. Being the first large-scale application of the Van de Graaff generator for atom smashing, it is our pleasure to dedicate this location as a memorial. And at this time, before I make that presentation, I just want to let you know one little personal item. Westinghouse means a great deal to me. When I was in high school, I was one of the participants in the Westinghouse talent search. And I think of that every time I see that big W up there. So we have a lot in common. So it's a double pleasure for me today to make this presentation. And I'll ask Jim Moore if he will come forward. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the IEEE, it gives me great pleasure to present this plaque commemorating the atom smasher as the first large industrial application here at this place. Thank you.
Professor Douglas, Dr. Klein, Mr. Taylor, and other guests, on behalf of all the employees of the Westinghouse Water Reactor Divisions, I'm particularly honored to acknowledge this dedication of the Westinghouse Atom Smasher as an IEEE Milestone site. As an old mechanical engineer, I want to tell you that the Atom Smasher is a warm spot in my heart. It was the landmark that got me to this site to start my first job as far back as December 1956. I'd like to thank the IEEE for this unusual honor, and I'm especially grateful to the Pittsburgh chapter of the IEEE, first for these handsome plaques, but most of all for taking the time and having the consideration to support our facility for this milestone designation. The industrial uses of atomic energy encompasses such a short period of time, historically speaking, that we really haven't had much experience with thinking about our business from the standpoints of tradition and historical significance. Certainly, we always look back on such early achievements as the Nautilus submarine, which you may have read is on its way being towed to a museum in Groton, Connecticut, and the shipping port atomic plant, which you also probably aware is in the midst of decommissioning. We look upon those early achievements with great pride, and we enjoy remembering that Westinghouse was there at such an important time in our American history. But we don't often look back at the dedicated research and extraordinary accomplishments that really preceded those historical achievements. This atom smasher certainly qualifies as one of those extraordinary accomplishments that's not acknowledged very often, or often enough. And even more important than honoring this site is to take a moment to acknowledge the men and women who worked here and continue to work here, Westinghouse employees who have made a significant contribution to harnessing the power of the atom. The Westinghouse Corporation has indeed built a remarkable business on the groundwork that those employees accomplished here at the Atom Smasher. I too would like to acknowledge 3 members of the IEEE who are most personally responsible for this designation as an electrical engineering milestone: Dr. Coltman, Dr. Angelo, and Tony Ferrari. And in behalf of everyone here, I'd like to thank the employees of Forest Hills and our guest musicians for organizing this delightful ceremony. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The last thing is, it gives me a lot of pleasure to, again, also thank the musicians of the brass ensemble of the East Wind Symphonic Band. They're very good. And I understand we have a member out in the audience here who's behind the scenes. Tony Ferrari is a member, but they wouldn't let him play today for some reason. And Tony, thank you too also for the help during the Atom Smasher. I didn't mention you earlier, but I was saving you for the end here. Also, I want to thank Jane McCreary, who did a lot of work in setting this thing up today too. The last thing I want to do is invite you all for refreshments in the auditorium over there, and thank you very much for your kind attendance today.
Oh, easily.
Back to the slide.
She's going to
I'm going to get a picture of the cake next.
She will be living in some house. Yes, but they are working. Now,
It doesn't have a time
so
on
there
it.
may be a couple of weeks.
I'm supposed to still be working. It does right now. The clock is not right.
Deep breath. For the excellent meal, that was delicious. I enjoyed it. Well, for those of you that don't know me already, my name is Denny Taylor, and I'm the chairman of the Pittsburgh section. And I'm along for a free ride tonight. All I have to do is talk for a couple minutes up here and get a good meal. I have to thank all the other people later on for all the work they did. Well, it was a real pleasure for me today to be a part of the ceremony that we had. And for some of you that don't know it, we had a very beautiful ceremony this afternoon over at Westinghouse Forest Hills site of the Atom Smasher. Lost my thought there. Of the Atom Smasher, and just had a great afternoon, and just very, very nice. The History Committee, which is chaired by Steve Angelo, began early in August of 1984 to start the process to prepare and document the necessary information to prepare for this nomination. A great amount of effort went into it and was expended in completing these requirements, and I really do appreciate the work the History Committee did on this. And it did culminate today, especially with the presenting of the two brass plaques that they have one at the site right at the Atom Smasher on the building, and one is going to be on the fence right outside the site, so that everybody, including the public, will be able to enjoy and understand what that's all about. The weather was great. We even had a 5-piece brass ensemble, the East Winds Symphony Band. Compliments of Tony Ferrari. Thank you, Tony, for that. I said coming in, you go to a meeting and you kind of think of it as, this is a nice event, but how many times do you go into a meeting and have a brass band playing? It really picked me up. I was really ready, It was like a shot in the arm. I really enjoyed it. And I didn't suck. The weather and the brass band, I think I could just dance all the day, But it was very, very nice. I'm very pleased with the attendance tonight, and I'm sort of in awe a little bit, too, with the people I have tonight here. The fellows tonight from IEEE. I look around, I see so many of them, and I'm really very, very happy that we have so many people that have had that chance to have that high honor in IEEE. And I know that we were talking a little bit earlier about the pioneers in the history of electrical engineering, Steinmetz, Tesla, and Westinghouse, and some of them in the Pittsburgh area here. And I said, geez, I wonder if that was just a quirk that they were here all together at that time. And a couple people said, well, just wait another 50 years, you'll find all these people standing around you here are going to be in the same ballpark. I think that's true. I think that's really true. Well, a couple of things I'd like to do. The first, IEEE Electrical Engineering Milestone. The purpose of the program is to commemorate nationally significant events in electrical engineering history and to commemorate events that have lasting importance. And definitely the Atom Smasher fits both of those bills. Also, I want to say a few words about the Pittsburgh, the process for making electrical engineering milestone nomination. It requires a rather lengthy nomination supported by a lot of documentary evidence. And then it goes through the typical red tape procedure that I control. No, I don't control that. Tony Ferrari and people on the History Committee and the IEEE Executive Committee has control over it. And I want to say that the nomination that John Coltman and Stephen Angelo and others put together, especially John Coltman, was very well documented, and the material I saw today at the research laboratory was a packet of letters dating from 1935 through 1938. You can trace step by step the development, Westinghouse's decision to get into nuclear physics, the decision to hire Wells to head the program, the decision to build the Atom Smasher. It was really exciting today to trace that development through those letters, and I'm very happy that that type of documentation has been preserved. So I'm very happy to be here, very happy to participate in the ceremony honoring the Westinghouse Atom Smasher. Thank you. Thank you, Ron. I just wanted to mention one other thing that I find today coming through my mind is sort of the purpose of IEEE. And our purpose is twofold: scientific and educational, and professional. I think about one of the things it says under there, and it says, IEEE strives to enhance the quality of life for all people throughout the world through constructive application of technology in its field of competence. I think of things like this Atom Smasher really coming to the forefront of doing that, promoting understanding of influence of technology on public welfare. Just thinking back at how in 1936, 37, these engineers and scientists got together and really started a trend of something that I think really benefited society. A couple people tonight I want to make sure that I mention and thank them. First, and you've heard his name already, is Steve Angelo, who's chairman of our history committee at Pittsburgh section. He did an awful lot of work in setting up these meetings tonight, the afternoon session today, and also the work on the Adams. Thank you, Steve. Also, Tony Ferrari for his work in promoting this whole history committee activity and working on the national level also. I don't know what he did, how much money he spent there to get this first. Because, you know, we didn't make it first in the nominations from the history committee, but we were speedy enough to get it first in the actual dedication. So Pittsburgh always tries to run ahead of different things. You know, we got that Ram and Nally problem now. We're number one there. We have to work here too pretty hard. A couple other people I want to mention. Charles Ruck is here, Westinghouse historian, and he's working on Westinghouse's 100th anniversary, I believe, coming up. Charles, nice to see you here tonight. I understand he has a few boxes of information that might go back a couple of years too. Just one other thing was the Pittsburgh Executive Committee is very happy to be in attendance tonight. There's a couple of people here I just want to mention. Bob Cunningham is here taking a few shots with the video camera. Bob's our vice chairman, and you people were kind enough to elect him as chairman for next year. Bob, thank you. The other person from the executive committee tonight is Grace Yaris. She's here as treasurer and incoming secretary. Grace. Bob also mentioned that we are glad we would be willing to trade the videotape of this affair for those two plaques to history committee. Ron said he'd have to think about it a long time. Well, on with the program here. Dr. Coulter has done an awful lot of work in putting together this nomination, and he just has really done a super job. I really enjoyed reading over the nomination. I think it was like last November we started really to see the beginnings of it and saw the major portion of it around December, January. But the other day I sat down and just to familiarize myself with the whole thing, I looked over it again. It's just looking back to the documents, 1929, 30, 35, it's just really kind of makes you get a kind of a cold chill to think about all the things going on back through that time. But John's going to give us a discussion and talk on the Atom Smasher. And just to mention a few things, John is an IRE fellow from 1955. And he got his BS from Case Institute of Technology and his MS and PhD from the University of Illinois. John has fellow work for contribution in the fields of microwave techniques, X-ray applications, and nuclear studies. And he's been retired from Westinghouse. Nothing sacred anymore. I know all about you, John. Come on out and give it a thought.
A milestone is a marker along the road. It tells you how far you've come, and in some cases, how far to your destination.
Hey, Walt,
For
leave that on. It's not going to hurt the
Westinghouse,
screen.
the Atom Smasher, you see here, is a zero mark. The point where the corporation set out on a road whose destination was not only not known, but quite unimaginable. I want to tell you tonight something about the steps along that road, and particularly about some of the people who were instrumental in accomplishment of that journey. 1932 was an extraordinary year in nuclear physics. Graaff and Walton produced the first nuclear reactions using artificially accelerated heavy particles. The neutron was discovered, and E.O. Lawrence demonstrated nuclear reactions with the cyclotron. Nuclear physics became the hot field in many universities. Westinghouse interest in this area first took the form of explorations by a patent attorney, R.P. Jackson, who in 1935 visited Lawrence to discuss possible applications of the cyclotron. I think this visit may have been stimulated by inquiries made to Westinghouse by G&E, who was representing Fermi in England and was exploring the possibility of selling rights to patents that they hope to have issued in the United States concerning slow neutron activation. Those patents actually were a valid patent, was never issued in the United States, but I believe that this is one of the things that triggered off Westinghouse to look into this matter, and was why a patent attorney was the first one, at least in the records that I have, to discuss this subject relative to Westinghouse. Jackson's report to S.M. Kittner, who was Vice President of Engineering for Westinghouse, was referred to L.W. Schutt, then Director of Research. Dr. Schutt, who held this post from 1930 to 1948, was a delightful man, as this photo implies. He made many scientific contributions, particularly in the new field of radio. And he ran the research laboratory in a very personalized fashion. He was acquainted with all of the scientists. He discussed their work with enthusiasm and really mixed it with the personnel. He played an important role in establishing not only the nuclear physics effort, but in reawakening the corporation to the importance of fundamental research. Now, Chubb reported back to Kittner that the envisaged applications of the cyclotron, which were largely in the production of artificial radioactive isotopes that might be used in medical procedures, were insufficient to justify a research program until such time, he said, as the corporation could see its way clear to a fundamental research program. It must be remembered that in 1935, the country was still firmly in the grip of the Depression. This was only 3 years after Hoover had departed the presidency, and Roosevelt and the Democrats were struggling to see some light around the corner. Kittner thought, in spite of the fact that they couldn't find justifiable applications for the cyclotron or nuclear physics, that they had to go ahead anyway, initiate some sort of program that would keep Westinghouse in touch with whatever might develop in this new field. Accordingly, Chubb began a search for a man trained in nuclear physics, since there were none on the staff of the research laboratory, and to initiate a program in this field. To save time, Charlie Slack, who was later director of research for the Bloomfield Lamp Research Laboratory at Westinghouse, began some work looking at a way to generate neutrons for this radioactive isotope production. So it was a two-pronged affair. One man assigned in Bloomfield and authorization to hire somebody at research to begin a program in nuclear physics. The man selected was Dr. William Wells. He received his PhD at Johns Hopkins and had been on the faculty at the University of Minnesota for just 2 years before accepting Chubb's invitation and coming to the Westinghouse Research Laboratory. He came in June 22nd of 1936. Wells must have been quite an effective person, for in just 6 weeks, he issued an elaborate report outlining the status of the various nuclear physics efforts around the country, comparing in detail of the various machines that were being feverishly worked on in many universities around the country, assessing their potential, and he recommended, though not in so many words in that report, it's fairly clear that he leaned rather heavily towards a Van der Graaff generator as the centerpiece for the Westinghouse effort. He justified this choice on many grounds, but I think most important among them was that he felt that the precision control of the voltage of such a machine would enable real fundamental studies of the nucleus to be made with high precision, and that this was the objective of having such a machine rather than simply something that would produce radioactive isotopes that might be silver. The committee was established, and one member of that committee is here tonight, Gaylord Penn, who at that time was manager of the Electrophysics Department of Research, to look at Wells' report and make a recommendation as to what should be done. They did recommend the construction of Van der Graaff, in spite of the fact that the goal of 10 MeV was something far beyond what had been reached to date, and was considered a very substantial step forward. Almost as remarkable as Wells' very rapid work between the time he came and the time of issuing his report, which was about 6 weeks, was a quick reaction of the corporation to this recommendation. For the next few months, we find that a pressurized machine of unprecedented size had been designed, cost estimated, and approvals received from top management. By November of 1936, quotation from Chicago Bridge and Iron for the construction of the pressure tank was in hand. Here's a schematic diagram of the machine. This sketch was made in about April of 1937, after the design was fairly well in hand and the construction well started. It consists of a very large pressure tank, 30 feet in diameter, some 47 feet high, with a height from the ground of the top of 65 feet. The pressure vessel was designed to operate at 125 pounds of air pressure. And that, the purpose of that vessel and the high pressure is to prevent spark over from that spherical electrode in the center of the dome. That electrode is charged to the high potential by means of rotating belts, traveling belts, driven from motors at the bottom of the tank. These belts are insulating material, Balata rubber, as a matter of fact, was the choice. Charges, electron charges are sprayed on the belt, much in the same fashion that you charge up a comb by running it through your air. The belt will transport these charges up to the interior of the sphere, all the time working against the electric field due to whatever potential happened to be on the sphere. That's the way the energy is put in mechanically by the belt charging moving these charges through this field. Once inside the upper sphere, they're in what is known as a Faraday cage. There is no field inside of this. They can be picked off the belt by a series of pointed electrodes and used to charge the upper sphere. This sphere is supported on 4 columns of porcelain. There are aluminum rings in between successive sections of the porcelain insulators, and a series of rings outside of the hole to distribute the potential uniformly from the top where the high voltage is down to the bottom of the tank, which is 0 potential. Down the center of the column is a very large vacuum tube. At that time, by far the largest accelerating tube that had ever been attempted. It was itself 37 feet in length and the 12 inches in diameter. The tube is evacuated. An ion source at the top of the sphere generates positive ions, either hydrogen or deuterium or helium. And those positive ions, once introduced into the column, are accelerated by the high potential carried across the metal rings which intersperse in the column, and driven down to the exterior of the tank, the bottom end, where there's a magnetic analyzer. This is used to separate out the several different particles which may be in there at the same time. It's very difficult to have a pure deuterium source without having some hydrogen in it. But those can be magnetically separated out so that one knows exactly what particles one is working with. They proceed then to beam exit ports down in the first floor of the building where the experiments are done. Or if there's special shielding precautions to be taken, they can be extended to that pit, sunk into the ground where it's easy to provide shielding. There's a view looking up the interior of this machine. At the time it was being constructed. You can see that a light at the top of the tank there. The top is open at this time of the construction because a lot of this material had to be lowered in through the top of the tank before it was closed. Porcelain insulators are in place. The workmen are fastening the rings together. The central vacuum column is not yet in. It would come right down the center of this set of 4 insulators when it's in its final position. Here is one step in the construction of the machine. On the ground in the forefront there is the inner sphere attached to the crane, which is about to be lowered into place through an opening in the top of the tank, which has not yet been closed. The tank is still supported by its framework and by some other scaffolding. Here is the exciting moment of lowering the inner sphere into the dome. And on July of 1937, the tank was closed, and the company was felt that it was appropriate to let the world know what it was up to. The building of this machine excited quite a bit of interest. Newspapers around the country. It is by far the largest magnet graph that was ever attempted. There were others that had been running at fairly somewhat modest voltages. There were 2 large ones under construction at the Carnegie Institution and at MIT. There was a pressurized one in operation at Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, but it was considerably smaller than this one. This was certainly the giant of its time. Wells was very cautious about the 10 MeV plans that he had, since nobody had gotten that high with this kind of machine, and it was evident that MIT and Carnegie Institution were in trouble. So Wells advised that they ought to describe this to the press not as a 10 million volt machine, but as a 5 million volt machine, and be a little bit on the safe side. Actually, they never quite made it. About 4 million volts seemed to be the highest that was obtained. It was not limited by spark over the tank. That part of the design was adequate, but it was limited by problems of charge leakage down the belts. And it was quite a long time before they got this machine operating at a substantial voltage. Newspapers and magazines make quite a story of this, and this is an artist's drawing of the machine taken from a Life magazine article at the time. By September of 1937, the building below the tank was finished. The long job of finishing the interior mechanisms and getting the machine up and running was underway. Here's a view of the research laboratories at Forest Hills with its newly added machine. There's a number of buildings, so those of you who are there this afternoon will recognize are on the site now that were not then. Among them was a large building next to the little power plant there, which was built for electronics work, just in back of the atom smasher itself. Now, during this time, in 1937, while the machine was still under construction, Chuck was busy convincing higher management that the fundamental program was important to the laboratories and to the corporation. As we noted before, Chubb had said he couldn't really justify this machine until the company could see its way clear to do fundamental research. Kinder had said, well, let's go ahead anyway. But they hadn't really decided to do fundamental research. They had just decided to get into nuclear physics. By the spring of 37, however, Chubb had made his point, and the management established a corporate-supported program devoted to basic research, not only in nuclear physics, but in areas that they felt were pertinent to the company's business in physics and fields allied with electrical engineering. To lead this program, Chubb hired Edward Euler Condon. Condon is on the left here, and seen as the exit port of the atom smasher. On the right is Jerry Hill, one of the research fellows. Condon was very well known at the time. Well known later also. He had a very remarkable career as a young man at Princeton. His texts, Condon and Morse, and Condon and Shortley, in the subject of the relatively new field of quantum mechanics, are still regarded as and used as texts in the field. They're really classics of the literature. And Condon was later named, after about 10 years at Westinghouse, he left to become the head of the National Bureau of Standards and led that for the country for many years. Condon arrived in September of 1937, just as the major construction of the atom smasher was being completed and the work of getting the machine running and up was underway. I think I never knew a person who got more obvious fun out of a serious endeavor like physics. He was able also to transmit his enthusiasm and delight in these matters to those around him, and to explain quite complex matters in a way that gave them the utmost transparency. To some extent, this was an illusion. I remember Jerry Hill, I think it was, commenting to me. He said, whenever I go from a lecture by Condon, I come out thinking, my, it's just as clear as the day. I understand it all. And he says, 2 days later, I began to wonder about some of the details. And but he left you like after a talk about physics, like some of the religious people on television and these stadium shows leave their audience feeling that really this is the way of life. His enthusiasm and experience were not, as a matter of fact, confined to physics. In his younger days, he was a reporter for a journal that dealt with ladies' wear, and was the author of several of the little books that sold for a nickel called Holloman's Little Blue Books. I haven't seen one of those for about 40 years. But you used to be able to buy them. They were little books on various subjects of interest, and Condon generated several of them for that series. Condon was responsible for an important innovation in the conduct of research at Westinghouse. He established a fellowship program under which young doctors in physics and allied fields might make application for a 2-year fellowship, during which they would pursue a research project of their own device. As a matter of fact, I was one of those fellows who came to Westinghouse proposing a study in the branching ratio of beta decay, if I remember the title correctly. I'm sure that the title is the only thing I could remember. I never got to do it because the World War, which was 1941, the United States participation in the World War was obviously becoming imminent, and Westinghouse suspended its fundamental research program for the duration of the war. But in the intervening 4 years, between 37 and 41, a number of research fellows were hired under this program, and their subsequent careers, both inside and outside of Westinghouse, has forcefully demonstrated the effectiveness of this selection method. Among the first group of research fellows hired under this program was Dr. William E. Shuck, a PhD graduate from the University of Illinois. Shuck is a strong link between this fundamental research and the pioneering efforts at Westinghouse in nuclear energy. Along with Wells and 2 other fellows, Stevens and Haxby, he devised the experiment demonstrating the existence of photofission. This is the phenomenon by which uranium is split, not by a neutron, which is the major mechanism of the nuclear reactor, but by a gamma ray. The process is of some importance in the design of nuclear reactors because it goes on all of the time, even though it's not the primary mechanism by which the reaction is carried out. The work was done shortly after the announcement by Hans Strassmann of the fission of uranium by slow neutrons. And the report of this work, along with several other papers generated by this initial group, established the Westinghouse program as a genuine fundamental effort, quite comparable with those in many universities. The announcement of Hahn and Strassmann on the fission of uranium revealed to those in the know that energy from the nucleus, which is long known to exist, might be extracted by a practical process. And this knowledge was pretty well bruited about by physicists, but because of the war effort, and because of the fear that the Germans might be starting to make use of it, the physicists in general were very quiet. And only a few publications, popular publications, made any mention of the fact that uranium fission might be a way to extract the energy known to lie in the nucleus. As the war effort built up, Westinghouse decided to suspend its fundamental research efforts and turn much of its work to research in microwave radar. Such a shift took place also in academic institutions, resulting in the formation of such very effective organizations as the radiation laboratories at MIT and similarly at Harvard. At Westinghouse, the atom smasher was shut down, and Dr. Shug was named head of the newly formed electronics department, housed in a new building just behind the atom smasher. William Wells departed, I presume, though I have no direct evidence of this, because he was unhappy at the closing down of the atom smasher, to take a job at Westinghouse Airbrake, where, oddly enough, he pursued a career in pneumatics, and as far as I know, never engaged in nuclear physics beyond that time. Now, even though the atom smasher was shut down, Westinghouse did not lose touch with progress in nuclear energy. Here's another milestone on the road that we're describing tonight. It's a tiny but important one. This is a piece of metallic uranium, which was used actually in the full-fission experiment that I described. But it's significant because it was made at the Westinghouse Lamp Division in Bloomfield, New Jersey. In 1922, Harvey Rechner, who later was director of the Bloomfield Lamp Division Research Laboratory, had developed a method for reducing uranium salt to metallic form in order to investigate the properties of metallic uranium to see if a lamp film might be made of it. He found the melting point was too low. It's interesting to think that at that time nobody knew what the melting point of uranium was. One of the elements in the class of tungsten thought it might be a substance. The melting point, after he achieved this extraction of the metal, was found to be too low, and he set the effort aside. But when the attempt to create a nuclear pile in Chicago got underway, the only immediate source of uranium was at Bloomfield. A.H. Compton, who was a colleague of Rechler's, knew about Rechler's work in this, and approached the lab division and asked if they could supply several tons of metallic uranium. Rechler set up a production line consisting of a room in the lab division filled with the standard galvanized iron wash tubs. You might have taken a bath in when you were in the country. And within a relatively short time, produced all the uranium that was used in the pile at underneath the stadium in Chicago. Now, in Condon was also active with the Manhattan District effort to separate uranium isotopes leading towards the bomb production. And several persons from the Forest Hills Laboratory, including one or two research fellows from the Atom Smasher program, were sent to join in that activity at Oak Ridge. Westinghouse, as a matter of fact, supplied all of the vacuum pumps, which were designed by Schuck, to Oak Ridge for use on the Cagatron, which was an isotope separator of the electromagnetic sort. Thus, all through the war, Westinghouse remained knowledgeable and in close contact with the growing activity of the Manhattan District directed towards the production of atomic bombs. At the end of the war, Westinghouse began to return to its more normal research activities. The atom smasher, which had been used simply as a compressed air tank for experiments in jet engine propulsion, which these laboratories also were pioneer under Stuart Way, was refurbished to return the atmosphere to service as a particle accelerator. Now, a disturbing piece of knowledge had emerged during the war concerning this tank. It turned out that the iron of which this tank was made had an unfortunate property of becoming brittle at low temperature. And this was learned, sadly, by the breaking up of several Liberty ships made of the same iron in the sub-freezing waters off Alaska during the war. The cold temperatures simply embrittled the metal and they cracked up like glass. Therefore, there's a great deal of caution exercised about pumping this huge thing up with 125 pounds of air after that fact became known, though it had been done with great aplomb before the war. Consequently, the tank was thoroughly inspected for cracks. One method was to X-ray all of the wells, because an X-ray machine of that high voltage was too heavy to move over the surface of the tank. Only the X-ray head was used, and the high voltage was supplied by these two wires you see coming out there. They start from an X-ray power supply in the electronics building, go out the window, and are hung up over the tank. Those operated at 100,000 volts. Kind of a sporting proposition, carried out by a couple of sporting technicians named Wally Jones and Walter Burke. The atmosphere was put back into service in 1947. Maurice Jennings is manager of the nuclear physics group. He was part then of the electronics and nuclear physics department under Shuck. And we have at least two people here tonight who joined the activity at that time, Max Carboni and Ken Richmond. There are a few others who were invited to this dinner who couldn't come but are still extant. And the machine was put back into service for basic research in nuclear physics. At this time, a good deal of that basic research was supported by the Office of Naval Research under the Navy, and continued as a basic tool until 1958, when it was replaced in function by a somewhat smaller 2 million volt commercially made machine, which, however, was a great deal more compact. The 2 million volt machine has a tank that's about 7 feet high, a little higher than I am, compared to this giant. And that machine first installed in a building behind this, and then later moved up to the new research site at Churchill, is still in operation. So we have continuous history of Van der Graaff operations since this time. Now, in the meantime, this man appeared upon the scene. He did not emerge from the depths like this. Some people say he descended from heaven. In any case, Hyman G. Rickover of the United States Navy was a man whose influence on the nuclear energy program was most profound. Rickover established two programs for the development of a nuclear reactor to drive a submarine. One with Westinghouse and one with General Electric. The negotiations for this sort of thing had been under discussion for some time, and the people from Westinghouse who were down in Oak Ridge had been working on the Daniels pile, which is sort of a forerunner of a pile that might be used to where the heat could be usefully extracted. So we had some people who were fairly knowledgeable with the technology. as well as the corporation who felt that now their time had come for this investment in nuclear physics to really pay off. Under contract in the Navy, Westinghouse established a development effort with a crew under the technical direction of W.E. Shuck. In the center of this group, you might be able to spot Bill Shuck there. And this is the Electronics and Nuclear Physics Department, or most of it, taken in 1948, just shortly before the operation for the Navy was begun. I don't know how many people here tonight appear in that picture, besides myself. Second row, you can see Max Garbuni with that large and florid tie up in the upper right-hand corner. I think we're the only representatives.
Don't forget me.
Oh yes, Rich Hansen is in there. He's down there behind Ted Krasik, is that right?
Behind Andy Krantz.
Yeah, behind Andy Krantz. Now, I can identify several people in that group that went with Shuck to form the nucleus, so to speak, the crew that started into the atomic energy business. Bill Hamilton was one, and later he became the general manager of the naval reactor program for Westinghouse, and maintained that position for many years. Sid Krasik managed the physics department in that same operation, and later managed the very successful development of the nuclear reactor for space propulsion. Monty Schultz undertook the complex problem of reactor control, both figuratively and literally wrote the book on the subject. Ray Schiff, Ted Farner, Bob Baird made important contributions. Shuck himself directed the entire technical effort and continued this role both in the Navy and the commercial atomic power operations until 1961. So it's out of this crew surrounding Shuck that was the beginnings of the technical side of the nuclear energy programs in Westinghouse.
You were all in that plane?
No, over in the south, near West Mifflin, was the first Pittsburgh commercial airport. This picture is earlier than the time we're talking about, but it shows a well-known visitor. If you're close enough, you could spot him there, complete with leather helmet, and in the spirit of St. Louis, being surrounded by straw-hatted admirers at the old Pittsburgh airport. Here's the way it looked at the time that Westinghouse bought the property. It's located quite close to the Allegheny County Airport, which was the second airport for Pittsburgh. They're almost contiguous, just a half mile or so apart. But this had been relegated to a private field and had very little business at the time that Westinghouse bought it. That's the Monongahela River in the background with the Keysport on the other side. It was on this site and in these airplane hangars that the naval reactor program was begun. This is called Bettis Field, named after an aviator. His name was Bettis, who rather famous in his day for holding a 248 mile per hour speed record in an aircraft. who came to dedicate the Pittsburgh airport, this airport, when it was open, and on his departure crashed into a mountain and was killed. That's where the name Bettis Field comes from, as the Bettis Atomic Power division of Westinghouse still celebrates that name. There were just 20 technical people started this operation in 1949. 10 years later, it had a staff of 4,000 people and had under its belt a remarkable series of achievements. Now, this isn't the place, or do we have the time, to detail the history of nuclear energy development and the dominant role played by Westinghouse in that development. But I did want to touch a few highlights to give you some idea of the growth of this endeavor. The first goal of Bettis was to design and develop an atomic power plant that would prove that nuclear power could propel a submarine. Many technical problems had to be solved. As an illustration was the need for pure zirconium in large quantities as a material, a structural material for reactor cores. Zirconium is one of the elements that has a very low capture cross-section for slow neutrons and is not affected by the high density of slow neutrons in there. And it's one of the very few elements that has any value with such properties that has any value as a structural material. But it existed only in the laboratory sample quantities, and it was necessary to devise a method taken from the laboratory to produce it in large quantities. Actually, the method is very tricky. It involves depositing the material from iodine vapor at high temperatures. It worked out quite successfully, and in just 14 weeks from the start of this endeavor, a pilot plant, this is the plant, was working and producing zirconium in a quantity sufficient to build the first reactor core structure. The prototype plant was built not in Pittsburgh, but in an isolated spot out in the deserts of Idaho, Argo. The S1W was the designation of this test facility, was built into the section of a submarine hull. That's what that round cylinder indicates. That's the mock-up of the submarine hull. It went critical, but it went into a nuclear reactive state a little more than 4 years after the start of the Westinghouse contract at Bettis Field. Work on the submarine engine itself and on the submarine at the electric boat company in Connecticut was being carried out in parallel with this prototype test under the assumption that this was going to work one way or another, and so the engine itself, the submarine itself, were under construction at the same time as this. And only 15 months later, 15 months after this plant first went online, the submarine Nautilus was commissioned. Sea trials began in 1955, January 1955. They initiated a remarkable career for a vessel that traveled across the world under the North Pole, set unheard of records for endurance, reliability under submerged operation. And you may have read in the paper last night that submarine, the first nuclear submarine in the world, is having had its nuclear reactor removed, is now being towed around through the Panama Canal to a resting place in London, Connecticut, where it will be preserved continued to design propulsion reactors, not only for many nuclear submarines, but also surface ships like the aircraft carrier Enterprise, and for the missile cruiser Long Beach, and for one ill-fated commercial vessel, the Savannah. But an important part of the departure for our story was the demonstration of the practicality of generating electrical power through nuclear energy. In a joint program with the Duquesne Light and several other engineering firms, a nuclear plant Shippingport was built, still under sponsorship of the Navy. It was operating at full power by December of 1957. Well before the Shippingport plant went into operation, Westinghouse had formed its commercial atomic power activity. That was in 1955, with Dr. W. Shupp as its technical director. In spite of many competing schemes being pursued in the U.S. and abroad, Westinghouse affirmed its faith in a particular type of reactor which had been so successful in the submarine, a pressurized light water reactor, a choice that was well justified by succeeding events. The first letter of intent for a purely commercial nuclear power plant, placed with a private organization, was placed with Westinghouse in September of 1955 by a consortium in Belgium. The actual contract and the actual construction, however, was delayed for quite a while, so that this was not the first Westinghouse commercial reactor to go into service. That honor belongs to the Yankee Atomic Power Plant in rural Massachusetts, which went online in 1960. The success of this plant, whose operation exceeded expectations by large factors, and which, as we think of it today, a very remarkable circumstance, was completed at 23% under the estimated cost. Stimulated a freshet of orders not only in the U.S. but all over the world. I should say that Robert Cregan was responsible for the design of the reactor internals, both for both of these pioneering plants, the Belgium Hull reactor and the Yankee row. Westinghouse, of course, was not alone in nuclear energy. General Electric was offering a boiling water design. Several other U.S. companies were getting into the business. Abroad, all the advanced industrialized nations had programs of their own. But the Westinghouse leading position was never challenged, and many of the other nations adopted designs under Westinghouse license. To this day, Westinghouse has supplied 92 reactors for electric power plants operating under construction. Our licensees and associates using Westinghouse designs and technology have contributed another 72, so that there's a total of 164 electric power plants of essentially the Westinghouse design in operation or under construction at the present time. The nearest competitor, General Electric, which was offering a boiling water reactor, has 68 plants in operation, and their associates 16. There are other types of plants, other designs, some using gaseous coolant, some liquid sodium coolant, some heavy water reactors. Their numbers are very small compared to these two major types, pressurized water and boiling water, and of them, the Westinghouse pressurized water is somewhat more than 2-to-1 score, both in numbers of reactors, total power generated, total generating capacity. So the nomination of Westinghouse and the success of this particular road is without any question. Well, the domestic expansion of nuclear power plants in the U.S. came to a halt in the early 70s. The acceptance overseas is still very strong. France generates some 60% of its electrical power by nuclear means, almost all of it using Westinghouse licensed technology. In spite of the fact that the lack of new orders for plants, the nuclear energy still represents a very significant business for Westinghouse. There are some 13,000 Westinghouse employees that work in the commercial power activities alone, not counting the still very active Venice operation for naval reactors. They're working some 35 locations spread all over the world. Our business today in nuclear energy is larger than it ever has been. And the reasons for this are that there's a very substantial business in supplying fuel for the present reactors, refurbishment of present plants, components and service on the present plants, as well as the international business, which is still on. When we look back on this new zero marker and think about what has transpired since, we may well ask, what is the significance of this machine? To me, it's a monument to a few men who had faith. A faith that investing in fundamental scientific research, attracting a brilliant staff, young in ideas, staying close to a newly opened field of science, would somehow be of importance to a corporation whose lifeblood was and is technology. Today, that faith and the willingness to follow it must be admitted, often falters. Perhaps, and I hope this is the case, this dedication by the IEEE will remind us that longer looks into the future, however cloudy that scene may be, are worth taking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I don't think words can express how great that was and how interesting the talk was. I really enjoyed it myself, and I know everyone else really did too. Nothing else to say, so thank you very much. And I just am in awe of the whole thing, and I'll just sit here and think about it all night. Thank you again, John.